Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night at the local time. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about Kharkiv direction. Very interesting situation in Kharkiv area. The Ukrainian sources continue publishing more and more additional and different reports, analysis regarding the situation in the area, trying to calculate the real number of Russian forces, trying to understand what are the real goals of the Russians, why the Russians stopped, why the Russians are not moving further, what is the difficulties the Russians faced, and so on. And the Ukrainians made a conclusion based on the information they got that the Russians are not going to move further. The territory they have already captured, this is exactly the things, the area, the line the Russians are planning to stand. And they provide significant number of different videos. For example, in this video we can see, maybe it's not very good quality and for you, but I will describe to you that according to this video, the Russians are building significant number of fortifications and the strongholds, trenches, shelters along the buffer zone they have already created. Furthermore, they made analysis that the Russians concentrated significant number of engineering equipment on the territories they have already captured, and they publish, as you can see right in front of your screens, the work of 42nd Mechanized Brigade, of how they were FPV droning the Russian engineering equipment. And according to information we have, since the beginning of Russian Kharkiv offensive, the Ukrainians managed to destroy up to 15 engineering machines. Of course, significant losses for the Russians, I'm talking about engineering machines, but all these strikes didn't stop the Russians. They continue creation of additional fortifications. What does it mean? First of all, for example, in this video we can see the depth, how the Russians managed to move in with the fortifications. Just 2.5 kilometers is the maximum depth the Russians managed to enter inside of the territory that used to be under control of Ukraine, so not on the territory of Russian Federation. Not so deep as you can see, but anyway, this is something like a buffer zone. All these things confirms one thing, that the Russians are getting ready before the beginning of Ukrainian greatest counter-offensive in Kharkiv area. As for these updates, just during the previous 24 hours, we continue receiving additional information from Vovchansk. The Russians reported that for the first time, by the way, for the first time since the beginning of the battle for Vovchansk, the Russians reported that the Russians began the assault operation inside of the citadel. So this is the first report that the Russians are trying to force the Ukrainians to leave this area. As for this area, we got just one video. This is the video that was published by the Russians during the previous night, and in this video we can see how the Russians continue bombing and attacking this territory with significant number of artillery strikes, with aviation strikes, and as you can see, probably we see still like the base of the buildings. We see lots of buildings, but most of them have been already reduced to ruins. It's impossible to be inside. As you can see, just on the second part of the building fell down. So as we understand, maybe week, maximum a week, and the Russians will destroy the citadel completely, and then they will be able to move further. As for the Ukrainians, the Russians reported that they also stopped making any counterattacks on the Russian positions. The only thing Ukrainians are doing right now is trying to concentrate their forces in the vicinity of Tikhe and Zybina. So they try to create a critical mass that they can use later to attack the Russian forces and to connect Vovchansk with, let's say, the roads, supply roads the Ukrainians can use for a deployment of armored vehicles. As for geolocations, we have additional video from the borderlands. In this video we can see how the Russians were trying to discover the Ukrainian positions in this forest and how the Russians were bombing these territories, so the discovered positions. We have adjusted the map because according to the previous configuration of the map, this territory used to be under Russian control. Now we are keeping this area as a gray zone. As for Liptsy itself, according to the Russians, the Ukrainians conducted no attempts to attack, just regular activity, and the Russians published just one video how they managed to discover the movement of another personnel carrier, and that the Russians, as a result of accurate strike, destroyed that vehicle. So nothing more. Anyway, we continue following the situation. Now we are moving to northern Kupiansk direction, and as you can see, the Russians published significant number of videos of how they were continue bombing the main supply roads, warehouses, ammo depots. So something big is about to start in this area. I'll remind you that just during the previous few days, the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian positions towards the main supply road between Petropavlovka and Orlovka, and they managed to improve their positions. And now we see that the Russians are pummeling this area. So as I understand, we are on the let's say edge of the beginning of Russian another attempt to attack towards Oskol River. The same situation we can see in the vicinity of Toretsk, Tarskoye, Terny. I'll remind you that this is a very difficult area for Ukrainians because just a few days ago, we got report from the 12th Azov Special Brigade, Special Purpose Brigade Azov about a very complicated relations between General Sodol, who was responsible for this area, and them. The Ukrainians reported that since the beginning of the special military operation, that general, let's say, destroyed more Ukrainian soldiers than the Russians, and now right on before the beginning of something big in this direction as well, we start receiving a lot of updates about Ukrainians complaining about the difficult situation. So very interesting, of course. Now let's move to Siversk area. We have additional updates from Razdolovka itself. 3 different mappers, pro-Russian, neutral, and without pro-Ukraine, of course, report neutral, and 2 pro-Russian mappers reported that the Russians established complete over 90% of the village of Razdolovka. According to all of them, just one street left under Ukraine control, and this is Tolochkova Street. But according to this, the progress, according to, let's say, how fast the Russians managed to clear most of the village, we can make a conclusion that probably today, on the 27th of June, the Russians will establish complete control over the territory, and then they will, after very short regrouping, the Russians will move further in direction of Perizny and Fedorovka, and this is probably the beginning of the battle for Siversk. Not inside of the Siversk itself, but very close. Also, the Russians renew their activity in direction of Vyumka, and they published significant number of videos of FPV drone strikes on Ukrainian positions in this area with the purpose to destroy Ukrainian support, to collapse Ukrainian logistic, and to prepare the foothold before further ground operation. As for Chasiv Yar, another day, let's say, artillery and heavy strikes on the citadel. The Russians are using in Chasiv Yar, in the Chasiv Yar citadel, the Russians are using the same tactics as we can see in the village, in the town of Vovchansk. So just now they're just bombing and attacking the Ukrainians there, and as soon as they are able to reduce this territory almost to ruins, only then the Russians will start any attempts to assault and capture this territory. As for western Avdiivka direction, we have a small improvements of Russian positions in this area between Novoalexandrovka and Kalinovo itself. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians in this area, which confirms that the Russians probably managed to improve their positions and just increase the foothold in this area. Nothing special, just regular military activity. Now we are moving to South Donetsk direction. We have just 2 important videos that show us the situation in this area. For example, in this video we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the concentration of forces of 79th Brigade, whose main base is located in the town by the name of Kurakhova. After reconnaissance operation, the Russians discovered the position and concentration of vehicles, and then the Russians start bombing this territory. Just a regular update about this direction. And now let's talk about some Kherson reports. Today we got a very interesting video from another angle. In this video we can see the work of ADAP 1500. The Russians managed to discover the concentration of Ukrainian forces or another command center, and as a result of strike with ADAP 1500, the building was completely destroyed. So this is not FAB 3000, but if it was FAB 3000, the consequence would be much worse. Today we got additional details from Ukrainian sources about the consequences of Russian attack in Crimea, of Ukrainian attack in Crimea. In this video video we can see that most of Russian base was really covered with the fire. Interesting reports we are receiving from Kiev. According to information we have, the European Union is planning to provide Ukrainians additional security agreement, and this security agreement is to be signed at European Union summit. Very difficult to understand how the non-military organization can provide military security agreement to Ukraine. Maybe they're planning to do something just with money or something like this. The Ukrainians are saying that they lost around 90% of energy facilities, and this, of course, this is not the final number before the winter. This number can become up to 100%. As for the United States of America, we got a very important statement that the President Office of the United States of America is not going to ask the Congress for additional military aid to Ukraine. This is very important. So the military aid Ukrainians received according to May, May things that took place in May in Congress is the last military aid until the end of the president elections. Very important updates are coming from Israeli-Lebanon borders. According to information we have, during the next 48 hours, the Israeli is going to begin another special operation in Lebanon, and we have lots of statements, lot of important reports from Canada, Qatar, Germany, Netherlands. They called on their citizens to leave Lebanon immediately. Israeli ground operation in Lebanon could begin within 48 hours. Also, we got additional reports about the concentration of forces on the border. The Israeli has brought a significant number of armored vehicles, tanks, and they are getting ready to begin this operation. On the other hand, we received also a very important update from Houthi. They published the video of the use of their own hypersonic missile. I'll remind you that, for example, the United States of America, according to information we have from the open source, still don't have their own hypersonic missile, but now we see that flip-flop forces, as somebody calls the forces of Houthi, have already created their own hypersonic missile, of course with the help of Iran, and this is something like a warning to Israel not to begin anything in Lebanon. Of course, we understand that it's not going to stop Israel from another special operation, and this will escalate the situation in this region even more. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.